If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members.
We are back. I'm Chris Evans, the CEO of Survival Dispatch. This evening, we're going to be discussing the 2008 terrorist attacks in Mumbai, where 10 terrorists armed with AK-47s killed 147 people. Sorry, dyslexic, 175 people, including 18 security personnel, 26 foreign nationals, and injured over 300 people. There's solid intelligence out there now, both open source and closed source, indicating that the tactics used in Mumbai, which were used, by the way, in 2015 in Paris, we'll get to that during the broadcast, Al-Qaeda is basically using that as their blueprint for their next attack here on America. So before we get going, we're going to do the conflicted question of the day. There we go. For those of you not familiar with this, conflictedthegame.com, check it out. They've got, I think, 12, 13, 14 decks now of these games that are set in post-apocalyptic conditions, scenarios. And the reason it's called conflicted is because there's usually some element of morality that comes into play. So I'm going to read this question. We want to see your answers in the live chat, comments down below. You can even email them to us, support@survivaldispatch.com. And at the end of our broadcast, everybody in the panel will give their answer to this question. So a large gang of traveling looters forced you and your family out of your retreat. While on their way to their next destination, they drove you and your family hours away and sold you and your family off at a trading post 150 miles from your retreat. A good Samaritan paid the price for you and set you all free. It's time to start over from nothing in a post-apocalyptic world. How would you go about securing the short-term and the long-term survival of you and your family? So again, we want to see your answers in the live chat or comment section down below. Stay tuned for our answers at the end of the broadcast. Quick update on the Religion of Peace. This website is thereligionofpeace.com. They've been tracking Islamic terrorist attacks and victims since 9/11, and there's some pretty astonishing numbers if you're not familiar with them. So since 9/11, 47,944 people have been killed in Islamic terrorist attacks around the world. And if we just go in, let's say, to this month's report, this is a 30-day report. This is the list of killings in the name of Islam maintained by the religionofpeace.com. Most of these incidents are terror attacks. A handful are honor killings or Sharia executions. During the past 30 days, there have been 173 Islamic attacks in 20 countries in which 1,221 people were killed and 359 were injured. So go to the religionofpeace.com if you want to check it out. We track it very closely every day. And again, the numbers are pretty staggering. And you know what? I forgot to switch it over to this page so y'all can see it. So this is religionofpeace.com. There's your 47,944 right there. And the 30-day report is right here that has the numbers that I just quoted. Again, the religionofpeace.com. By the way, we could really use a producer. If there's somebody out there has some spare bandwidth, would like to produce Survival Dispatch News, we'd love to talk to you. All right, so let's get into the main topic here. And I'm going to go through the timeline relatively quickly, and then I'm going to bring our panel in. We have a stacked panel tonight, by the way. So the 2008 Mumbai terrorist attacks, also known as 26/11, were a coordinated series of assaults carried out by 10 Pakistani terrorists affiliated with this terrorist group called LET, an Islamic militant organization based in Pakistan. The attack lasted for 4 days from November 26th to November 29th, 2008, and remains one of the most brutal urban terror attacks in modern history. So some key facts. There were 10 guys. That's it. 10 operatives from Pakistan. 175 people killed. And as I mentioned, 18 security personnel, 26 foreign nationals, over 300 injured. They targeted 12 locations, and we'll show you some maps as far as the progression of their attacks in Mumbai. That it also includes high-profile landmarks, which is a typical thing for Islamic terrorists. They like to go after something that has some sort of bigger meaning. The whole siege was 60 hours long, so not a tremendous amount of time considering the amount of damage that they did. Only one attacker survived, and he was later executed in 2012. So here are the main targets in the timeline. So the first target was this Terminus railway station. 2 gunmen opened fire on civilians with AK-47s, and they killed over 50 people to get this thing started. There was no immediate police response due to a lack of armed personnel. Now, the guy in New York this week who had a rifle from Palmetto State Army, it was a standard AR-15, but the media wanted to portray it as an M4 fully automatic rifle. If he had have had an M4, and if he had 1 or 2 other people with him, they would have been able to easily surpass 50 people killed. So you can kill a lot of people in a short period of time if you're, the spawn of Satan. Number 2 was a cafe, popular with tourists. Attackers threw grenades and fired into the crowd. There were at least 10 people killed at that location. The third one was the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel. 4 attackers took hostages and set fire to parts of the hotel. Elite Indian commandos fought a 60-hour battle to retake control. The hotel was left heavily damaged and burned. The 4th location was the Trident Hotel. 2 attackers took hostages, killed 30-plus people, many of them foreigners. Rescue operations lasted over 2 days. And number 5, there was a Jewish center, and Jewish hostages, of course, were taken. All 6 were killed, including a rabbi and his pregnant wife. Commandos repelled onto the roof in a dramatic televised raid. So weapons used, AK-47, so 7.62x39 ammo, RDX explosives, hand grenades, GPS and satellite phones for coordination. As far as tactics and planning were concerned, the attackers arrived by sea, hijacking an Indian fishing trawler to reach Mumbai's shoreline. Trained in Pakistan, the group used satellite phones and GPS to stay coordinated. Calls between attackers and their LAT handlers in Pakistan were intercepted live by Indian intelligence. The impact and global response. India-Pakistan relations deteriorated sharply as to be expected, exposed massive intelligence and law enforcement failures in India, led to the creation of India's National Investigation Agency, NIA, and modernization of police response units like NSG, National Security Guard. And if you check out the note that I put up on Substack this morning, as well as on X, we're not prepared for this. Our law enforcement is not prepared for this, and we're going to get deep in the weeds on that soon. U.S. and Israeli intelligence agencies assisted in post-attack analysis, raised the global alarm over urban jihadist warfare and small cell assaults. So why does it still matter? It's become a template for modern coordinated urban terror. Small teams, soft targets, mass confusion. It's influenced training protocols for SWAT and counter-terror units globally. The attack shares chilling similarities with what groups like Al-Qaeda are planning right now at this particular point in time. Crazy, crazy stuff. So let's bring our esteemed panel on stage here. And I see we've lost Ted Yoho, but beside me, we've got Sal DeGennaro, long time no see. Below him, my good friend Randy Nance, combat wounded Green Beret. And below me, our in-house CIA operative, Jeff MD, also author extraordinary. You can see 2 of his books behind me, has more. And we refer to him as 007, and we don't care what the British say. It's what it is. And the reason I say that is because we get hate mail over that. We get people sending us hate mail saying, Jeff's American. You can't call him 007. We even had a Canadian email us one time and said, you guys are idiots. You don't know anything about 007. He's from Winnipeg, Canada. And he went on to write this nasty email. And anyway, that's the world that we live in. So I want to jump right in with an interesting piece from Mumbai, and then I'm going to come to you, Jeff, to get your thoughts on it. But we're already seeing intelligence. There's Mr. Ted Yoho, former congressional rep, Alachua County, Florida for 8 years, 28-year practicing veterinarian. Good to see you back, Ted. I've heard you bouncing in and out in the background.
My apologies.
So it's all good. Ted's down in the Keys. He leads a hard life. You know, it's terrible. He's down there for lobster season. Anyway, let's get into the first article. Let me get Ted back on stage here. So there was an American who was behind the 2008 attack on Mumbai. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background. And then I want to get your thoughts first, Jeff, simply because you work counterintelligence for many, many years. But there is intel that we'll be sharing shortly, not tonight, another night, that Al-Qaeda is actively recruiting guys who look like everyday Americans to facilitate and help their next attacks on America because they fly under the radar. So American David Coleman Headley was one of the leading planners of the 2008 terrorist attacks in Mumbai, which killed 166 people over 3 days at 2 5-star hotels, a train station, and a small Jewish community center. Headley, the son of a Pakistani father and American mother, had been chosen for the mission because he looked like a non-Muslim Westerner. He used those looks and his U.S. passport to plan logistics for several of the places attacked in Mumbai. Headley's role in the Mumbai attacks is the subject of a new Frontline documentary by ProPublica reporter Sebastian Rotella, A Perfect Terrorist, which I have open on the next tab, by the way. And it chronicles Headley's journey from the United States to Mumbai, reveals what U.S. and Pakistani intelligence officials knew about him before and after his mission. So, Jeff, speaking as a counterintelligence subject matter expert, how do we flesh somebody out like this?
Well, I wouldn't call myself a counterintelligence subject matter expert. There are people who specialize their whole careers in doing nothing but that, and that wasn't me. But they're really hard to ferret out because they are recruited specifically because they don't fit a profile. And everyone always laughs about, racial profiling. Well, the reason law enforcement profiles is because it frickin' works. The Israelis have done it for decades, which is why El Al planes don't get hijacked. If you're looking for an Irish Republican Army guy, he's probably not going to be the African American. If you're he's more likely to have a light complexion and red hair. So if you want to have someone who's effective, it's better to have someone the cops aren't looking for or aren't looking at. And Al-Qaeda, they have done this for years. John Walker Lynn was in Afghanistan. We picked him up. He was there at College on Gee when Mike Spann was killed up in the north, just outside of Mazar-e Sharif. They've been around. You'll get these radicals who, they're white bread American. They look like any Protestant, Anglo-Saxon, waspy kid from Connecticut. But they've gone over to the dark side. And they love those guys because they can, he had this guy had an American passport. He could hop on a plane, a lot of countries. There's no visa requirements. And he doesn't pop up on the radar.
I appreciate that, Jeff. Just, I haven't had a chance to look through all the live chats. I'm running like 7 monitors here, monitoring 9 locations. And somebody said their comment was deleted. We didn't delete anybody's comments, but YouTube, if that's the platform that you're on, frequently deletes comments before we even get to see them, but also it flags them and asks us if we want to give permission. I'm looking at YouTube in front of me. If that's the platform you're on, I haven't seen anything held, which means YouTube glitch. So Ted, refresh my memory. What years were you in Congress again?
2013 to 2021, and I was on the Foreign Affairs Committee and the Ag Committee.
Yeah, so the Foreign Affairs Committee, was there any element with regards to terrorism while you served?
Oh, yeah. Well, there's always a threat. I mean, as you opened your show and you talked about all those incidents, we looked at Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab, ISIS. We were there when the bombing in Libya took place with Obama and Hillary Clinton when they took out the no-fly zones, which, of course, led to a failed state that led to the rise of ISIS. And we dealt with that the whole time I was there.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff. Sal, we're going to come to you next. Just like to get your high-level thoughts on how do you ferret out these guys who don't look like what the terrorist is in our mind. It's not our visual image.
Well, when you profile, if you profile correctly, and profiling is a very important part of the human survival mechanism. But what you need to profile is actions and traits that correlate to the known threat profile that perhaps specific ethnicities may, account for most of any given threat profile, but that's not what you're looking at. You're looking at the behavior, right? So for example, if you're standing in front of, let's say, an emergency room of the only tier 1 trauma center in a mid-sized city, and there's a Middle Eastern guy taking pictures of the whole infrastructure, does that look shady? Yeah. But guess what? You could take the whitest guy from, the northern coast of Sweden, and if he's doing the same thing, well, it's the behavior that you should be looking at, right? So that's the only thing we can go on. We have to correlate the behavior and the known traits as they correspond to the known threat.
Yeah, appreciate that, Sal. Randy, I mean, you were on patrol frequently in Iraq, and how important was profiling to your operations that you guys were running when you were Green Beret?
Well, since, you're in a community, and certainly if you go into marketplaces and stuff like that, there is a ton of folks, and they all, it's this, you're in a foreign country. We'll just put it that way. Right. So profiling is fairly, certainly in the way that Sal just spoke about it, right? It's certain behaviors and actions that you're looking for, and not the overall every single person there, because you can't do that. And in patrol, that is very important. But I was also thinking, man, well, where's guys like Bergdahl, right? We want to know where that guy is, because somehow we took him back and he's back here in the United States, when you got to ask yourself, because I'm pretty sure he's the only Westerner they ever let go, right? I mean, all those other people got their heads cut off or killed. Every soldier that was captured, none of them came back alive except him.
Ted, do you want to comment on that?
Well, I think he's absolutely right. I want to take this back to the animal world. Animals profile. You take a group of cows and you put a couple new heifers or something in there, they profile. I mean, it is an innate survival instinct that we've been programmed with, and to take that out of the law enforcement, out of what you do in the military, I think it's a mistake, and we're shortchanging ourselves. Bo Bergdahl was a perfect example. I mean, you took a guy like that, and if I remember right, he was transgender, wasn't he?
I believe so. Could be wrong. I think you're right.
Well, I think I am. But
he definitely had some sort of mental issue. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So you look at the transgender terrorist groups today. That goes into what Sal and Jeff were saying. How easily they can be swayed, because they already have a vendetta against the Anglo-Saxon population. And so they're easy to turn, because it's a common enemy for them and the terrorists.
Trantifa, I believe, is the way it was described.
I think another name is the ZIZ group, ZIZ group.
I'm not familiar with those guys, but at the end,
they're a violent one.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought up the whole point about animals, though, Ted, and then that's obviously prudent for you being a veterinarian.
That's my job.
I heard somebody describe profiling like a cat sees a dog and the cat runs away. That's profiling in the most simplistic form. And I like how Sal said it's an innate thing, and yourself as well. So before we move on to the next article, one more question for you, Jeff. How concerned, in your opinion, should Americans be that sleeper agents like Headley could already be conducting reconnaissance on U.S. targets?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you've got, and what doesn't help is you get these, and I see their videos and I understand what they're doing. These First Amendment, I don't know what they call them, assessors. They go around and they take pictures, Auditors.
Right. Auditors.
Yeah, they run around. They'll sit in front of a company, a business, a home, and and just start videotaping. And it makes people uncomfortable. And they come out, oh, I've got a constitutional right to do this. Which, they do, but it's not. Doesn't mean it's smart. But yeah, I mean, you've got because all of these missions, they recon everything. They don't just go in and shoot. They know where they're going. They know where the exits are. They know the roads, and they go there ahead of time and look it over. And they're not going to hold up a sign saying, "Hi, I'm Al Qaeda on a recon mission." There's just going to be some dude with a camera or some dude with a smartphone. But yeah, it's a big concern. You know, you look at what happened in North Carolina with the two guys at the Green Beret officer. You know, the guy he killed on his property. What the hell were they doing back there? Well, they're doing recon.
Right. So Khalid Muhammad, our friend from Command 11, probably 2 weeks ago said to me that Al-Qaeda in particular right now is in the probing phase. So they have their targets identified both in Europe and America. And you had the guy on the Scottish Airways flight going from London to Galway last weekend, started screaming, you know, death to America, death to Donald Trump, I have a bomb. And clearly he was no threat. And if you watch that video over again, he was expecting for somebody to tackle him, take him out, punch him or whatever. That was a probe to see what the standard operating procedure is for the airline. And so Jeff's point with regards to them doing recon, that's a great example of it. They're adding that to their repertoire. They know exactly how long it's going to take for first responders, what first responders will come in. Randy will tell you he was a paramedic. Paramedics can't go on scene until law enforcement says it's secure, regardless of the situation. So the TV show that I mentioned, let me pull this up here, is called A Perfect Terrorist, or documentary, I should say, on PBS. And it's 53 minutes long. Clearly, we're not going to play a 53-minute video, but I am going to play a good portion of the beginning, probably 3 or 4 minutes. And then, Sal, I'll be coming to you first.
Tonight on Frontline, David Coleman Headley.
Headley was brilliant and evil at the same time.
An American raised in Pakistan.
He changes his name to David Coleman Headley so that he can travel more easily.
Recruited by Pakistani terrorists.
The guy who's holding a U.S. passport. Headley is a dream come true from the perspective of a terrorist group.
But also an informant for the DEA.
He uses that to cover allegations of his extremism.
And the major force behind the most spectacular terror attack since 9/11.
Mumbai's been hit and hit hard.
The attackers were well armed and well prepared.
David Coleman Headley, widely suspected to be a U.S. double agent.
Tonight on Frontline, ProPublica reporter Sebastian Rotella investigates what the U.S. knew about a perfect terrorist.
Did they ask him about his work for the U.S. government? We were told by the USA that is not to be asked.
The evening of November 26, 2008 was calm in the city of Lahore in eastern Pakistan. In one neighborhood, a man was at home with his wife when he received a text on his phone. He had been waiting for the message. He was told, "Turn on your television."
Hours ago, terrorists launched a brazen attack.
The Indian city of Mumbai is in chaos following a series of terrorist attacks.
Mumbai's been hit and hit hard.
900 miles away in India, the most spectacular terror attack since 9/11 was underway.
You heard a big blast right now inside the Taj Hotel.
The world watched as an icon of India was set ablaze, and civilians, Indians and Westerners, were methodically gunned down.
They wanted anyone with British or American passports.
And I could see someone lifting up a gun like that and firing.
With guns, grenades, and military precision, 10 men were laying siege to the port city of Mumbai.
The attackers were well armed and well prepared to launch what some here are calling India's 9/11.
166 people were killed.
Indian officials quickly connected the attackers to a militant Islamic group in Pakistan with ties to the ISI, the country's intelligence service. But what they didn't know was that for 2 years, an undercover operative had been casing the city, developing a blueprint for terror. His name, David Coleman Headley. He'd been chosen for the job because he had the perfect cover. He was an American.
So I'm going to go ahead and stop there. It's a fascinating video, by the way. I put it in the live chat, send it out to everybody if you'd like to watch the balance of it. So Sal, I want to come to you first. And I'm curious what you think the security gaps were that allowed Headley to move freely between terrorist training, American soil, and do you think any of those gaps have been addressed in your opinion?
So, coming out of the last 4 years to try to say any kind of security gaps have been improved, I think is absolutely ridiculous.
Great point.
When we look at something like this, though, we need to remind everybody, if you want to live in a free and open society, people are free to move around. So unless you want to live in North Korea or a place like that, it is hard, and far be it from me to defend like the FBI or other federal agencies that have over and over again not picked up on things that were obvious, right? But as an example, you have a guy like this, he's an American citizen, and he's like taking pictures of the Taj Mahal and stuff. Do we want to live in a police state that is going to ask you as an American citizen, why were you here, there, and everywhere taking pictures? There's certain threats that are just going to get through. That's why I always tell people, instead of asking the government to protect us, because they will always fail, carry your gun and pay attention to what's going on around you. And let's all continue to live in a free society.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Sal. So I'm going to just from here on in go clockwise on my screen. So Randy, Jeff, then Ted. So Randy, a question for you. And I'm going to just be straight up honest and say I don't really give a crap about this politically correct stuff, but it's a thing. So how can communities identify and report suspicious behavior without engaging in religious or, racist profiling, in your opinion?
I don't know, honestly. I mean, you would think, right, that people want to do things for the right reasons. And certainly we've all known that if something doesn't look right or smell right or feel right, that's probably the time to at least give it another look, right? But I guess you just don't, I don't know, maybe you have, I'm pretty terrible about that because I'm a profiler in an instant. I admit it. It's just the way it is.
That's the answer, though. I think that's the right answer. That's my answer as well. And I'd say everybody else on the panel agrees. It walks like a duck, quacks like a duck. It's a duck. Yeah. And you have to identify it as such. So, Jeff, to you next. I mean, you study and dissect stuff as an engineer as well. I'm curious what you think. What lessons can we learn from Headley's dual role as an informant and a terrorist when it comes to trusting intelligence sources, I should say?
You got to realize it. According to that, he was an asset of the DEA, so that was a drug investigation. Now, are drug dealers in a lot of part of the world connected to terrorists? Absolutely, in Afghanistan, for example. But because someone was a U.S. asset, doesn't mean that you're going to think, okay, I've recruited, FBI, I've recruited this guy to report on Goldman Sachs fraud, and then he turns out to be a terrorist. Well, that's probably not something you discussed in your meetings with the guy. So I take that with a grain of salt. But when it comes to reporting on people and what's going on, remember, you want to base your suspicions on actions, not necessarily appearance. Appearance will get your attention, certainly, but you got to look at what are they doing. It's not because you don't call the cops because okay, there's an Arab guy in my neighborhood. Well, there's Arab guys everywhere, and most Arabs are nice, peaceful people. But you may want to say, okay, I'll keep an eye on him. And then what is he doing? Is he doing something that is unusual, that doesn't fit in, that makes the hair on your back of your neck go up? That's when you got to collect more data. You've got to be your own political analyst or your own counterterrorist analyst to a certain extent. But you also got to remember, and I've said it on the show before, police don't prevent crime; they investigate.
Yeah, good point.
And Sal's right. It's on you. Unless you want to live in North Korea or East Germany, you got to be. You're your own first responder. You're your own cop. You've got to be able to defend yourself like that, not wait 10 minutes for a cop to show up.
Yeah, true story. So, Ted, to you next. Jeff, hold on a second. Well, go ahead, and then I've got a specific question for you, but go ahead with your comment first. Apologies.
Well, I think it goes back to the innate traits that we have. It is, if you see something like that and it's suspicious, you act on it. And then if you don't, you suffer the consequence. I was out fishing here in the Florida Keys about 6 years ago, and there was a boatload of people coming in from Cuba. And we stopped them, and they got deported. And I took a lot of heat from that, from the Cuban delegation. And I had pictures. And when we showed the people the picture, I said, you tell me that's a Cuban there. I said, to me, they look Middle Eastern. And you have to act, because if you don't get a second chance if it's a terrorist attack. And the world's become a very, very dangerous place. And, living here in Florida, with the military bases that we have, we just, we've gotten the extra postings about the ISIS or Al-Qaeda attacks on military people that were in Afghanistan and Iraq that were doing a lot of bombings or taking out Soleimani. And so those are very active things right now that are going on.
So before we move on to the next data set that I have to share, general question for anybody on the panel who wants to tackle it. Jeff alluded to the profiling that occurs in Israel. So many people would probably be surprised to learn that there's never been a commercial airliner hijacked in Israel, and they do not have the security theater that we have here in America. So everybody who goes on premises at an airport, doesn't matter what vehicle they're in, they're stopped and they're asked two questions: what's your name and where you're going? And apparently that trips up a lot of people whose intentions are not necessarily good. Then you have to check in at a counter. You can't just check in on your smartphone and proceed to walk to your gate. And the people who are working those counters are professionally trained to profile you, assess your behavior, those sort of things. And while that's happening, there's undercover officers watching people and their behavior, as far as, what their gait looks like, everything. And we don't do that here in America. We have security theater instead. And we make, 80-year-old grandmothers take their shoes off, which is total bullshit. Although I think they ended that just recently. But does anybody want to comment on, here's the question. Do any of you believe that we have any of this in place at all, similar to the Israelis, or are we just going to rely on the theatrical stuff? Jeff, go ahead. Take a swing at it.
It's theater, because to do what the Israelis do, you have to profile. And profiling is an ugly word that nobody wants to mention. And the reason the Israelis do it is because it freaking works.
Well, Russia.
90-year-old Irish grandmothers don't hijack airplanes.
Russia is a dirty word when it's spoken by Obama, Brennan, or any of that climate truth. But it doesn't mean it didn't happen. That's what I guess the question I'm asking is there any of this stuff going on behind the scenes that's not been shared with the public? I mean, go by all means, take a stab at it if you want.
I was just going to say, I flew, October 7th, in Israel. I flew out to Israel from Newark and back in August, right before that. And you're right. I mean, I had to go through, I don't think we had to stand in a separate line. We still had to go through all the same rigmarole, through all the security checkpoints, but there was an additional one to fly out on Israel Airlines. And, for one little known fact that people don't know, those are armed planes. They're the only armed planes. that fly civilians around. So those are actually Air Force pilots from the Israeli Air Force that are flying those things. But furthermore, you go through an additional, if you're not a Jewish there from there, even if you're flying between there and New York, those people didn't go through this type of interview. But for the rest of us, we had to go through an additional interview that they asked us where we were going, what we're doing, and why. And I mean, several questions. And you're right. These people are trained professionals, and that's exactly what they're doing. By all these questions, your answers, and how you answer, they're profiling whether you're going to get on that plane or not. And if you fail their test, you're not getting on the plane.
So, Randy, when you said they're armed flights, what's the context there?
Those are armed planes. That's what we were told. Those are like if someone. So I'm assuming if another aircraft is what I'm thinking. I mean, I don't know. They didn't tell us what the armament was, right? So I don't know. I doubt it has machine guns, but I don't really know. You know what I mean? But apparently those are armed. Those airplanes are armed in some way, and the Israeli airlines are the only ones that are.
They do have countermeasures. They have they have flares and things like that for surface-to-air missiles and air-to-air missiles.
Thanks,
hey,
Jeff.
Chris.
Go ahead, Ted.
Your question was, do you think we're doing that here, maybe behind the scenes? And I think it is. You know, with the CCTV cameras that are in place now and the AI that goes on, I think they are monitoring that. And if we're not, shame on us. And you look at the Israelis, you know, keep in mind, I know you guys know this, they all go through, you know, their training for, I think it's 2 years. And so they're very well aware of what can go on there. And then you look at New York with Rudy Giuliani, when he was profiling, you know, crime went down, and they get rid of profiling, crime goes way back up. So, you know, common sense tells you it worked pretty well.
Unfortunately, common sense not so common, right?
And that's the truth.
All right. So I'm going to bring up, there's a lot of information on the stuff I put together in Grok. So we'll go through it in bits and pieces and then get input from each of you on the panel. So first and foremost, and I'll put the link to this, by the way, in the chat so you guys can peruse it at your leisure later on. But it starts with a detailed report of everything that happened. And I gave you the timeline earlier, but I want to hit on some of the specifics. And Sal, I'll go to you first for your opinion at the first couple steps here. So you've got 10 terrorists arrive in inflatable speedboats after hijacking an Indian fishing trawler and killing its crew. And so that's the first 5 that are killed. Then the gunmen kill 2 people at the terminus, just the train station, the railway station, with gunfire and grenades. But by the time they were done there, they killed a couple of people who worked there, but they killed 58 total at that location. They injured another 104. And then they opened fire, another segment of them opened fire at a cafe, killed 10 more there. Then a taxi bomb explodes, kills 3 more there, 15 injured. Then another taxi bomb explodes, kills a couple more people. Then there's multiple explosions and hostage taking at these hotels, and there's 2 of them in that. Then they seize the Jewish center, and there were 9 hostages rescued from the first floor, but the rest were killed. Then you've got drive-by shootings from carjacked police. Somebody stole a Jeep, basically a police Jeep. And then you've got shootings and hostage taking at a hospital. And we're going to stop on that because we have very specific intelligence right now saying that Al-Qaeda is targeting tier 1 trauma centers in tier 2 cities with a population of 250,000 and down, being the only tier 1 trauma center. Just, Sal, I know you've studied this stuff at length, and I appreciate you joining us tonight because of that. That's a whole lot of attacks to happen with no response initially.
Well, first of all, the population of India is completely disarmed, right? And the truth is we probably wouldn't see much different response in one of the big blue cities either, where people are unarmed. At the train station, there was actually security guards there. One of them, they had bolt action rifles, actually. That's how behind the times they are, and one of them actually shot at one of the two terrorists who came into the train station, and those guys started shooting back with full auto AK fire, and all 6 of those guys, I think it was 5 or 6 of them, dropped their guns and ran out, right? So hey, you know what? A sighted in bolt gun, when this first shot was 30, 40 yards away, something like that. If you know what you're doing, you could get it done with that gun. But you have people who this has probably never even crossed their minds. Okay. And for the past few nights, you all have had, Mike Glover and other guys talking about there's no way our law enforcement is ready for this. Imagine Indian law enforcement, especially at that time. So it's an unarmed population. It is a population like the vast majority of people. They're not like us and our audience, most people. It doesn't even cross their mind. People were traveling that time of year. There was festivals going on. The train station was packed, etc. So you have, these guys are going to have, in future attacks like this, the first few hours at least, they are going to have total dominance of the skies. There is no doubt about that.
So, Sal, you mentioned, let's say our law enforcement's at this level, and at that particular point in time, you had the Indian law enforcement down here. A lot of stuff I've read on this says now that these, specialized SWAT teams regarding terrorists are functioning at a fairly high level. What's your understanding on that? You're studying.
Well, so even India learned so much of this. This was their 9/11. There's no doubt about that, and the issue though is when the specialized teams show up, usually it's no longer a fight, it's a turkey shoot because it's a specialized team. That Indian special forces team that finally went into the Taj Mahal, it took them a long time because it's a huge structure. But when those dudes found terrorists, they killed terrorists. It's once the guys who are well trained get there, it's a whole different thing. But how long does it take? It took 2 days for that team to even arrive on site, right? And if you're in one of these mid-tier cities in this country, maybe you have a SWAT team. I don't know. Maybe you don't. How soon is the SWAT team going to be there? If there's 5 or 6 different locations that are being attacked, where's the SWAT team going? You're on your own, Bubba. You're on your own.
So specific to the SWAT team stuff, a lot of tier 2 cities don't have that in-house specialty, but they rely on the sheriff's office to provide SWAT team. And I can tell you that from local knowledge here in Central Florida. So going back to the chain of events here and then coming to you, Randy. So after the hospital, they kill a bunch of police essentially downtown in the Mumbai. Then there's an explosion at these docks and they seized armaments from a boat. So it could have been even worse. There could have been some bigger stuff going off. And then the initial reports suggest that this hotel hostages have been resolved, but the fighting continued. And the reason the fighting continued, and Sal, correct me if I'm wrong, was because some of the attackers were dressed in first responder garb. So people thought that they were, law enforcement when in fact they were a terrorist. And we know that this is happening here in America. There's been first responder vehicles stolen, uniforms stolen. But with that being said, we have a one-pager. If you go to survivaldispatch.news and click on the main story up top, in that story, there's a PDF you can download that has some bullet points as far as Al-Qaeda's known intelligence to attack us here the next time around. And it includes stuff in there on posing as first responders. I'm not an expert on this. I'm taking this from other people like Khalid Muhammad and others said to me, they might have these uniforms, but there will always be something that will give them away. Like their footwear just won't jive for what a cop would be wearing or a paramedic would be wearing, or the badge looks a little, hinky sort of thing. And everything those guys have told me is that there's usually 1 or 2 things that'll give them away. But anyway, in Mumbai, when all hell was breaking loose, they got away with it. So anyway, the next morning, this is the second day, you've got more fighting in the hotels. Actually, this is the start of the third day. That's when the commando showed up that Sal alluded to. And so you've got this hotel is kind of the final spot. And the reason that I wanted to mention is because it's like the intel that we got from Khalid. So Al-Qaeda's plans for us, they attack 10 to 15 tier 2 cities that have one tier 1 trauma center. They attack soft targets, schools, retail centers, office buildings, those sort of things. But they end up at the tier 1 trauma center. And that's where, their final hurrah is going to be. In this case, it was these hotels that they had taken. But at the end of the day, they required commandos to wrap this thing up. I've already gone through all of the casualties. Randy, as a Green Beret, did you guys ever have to storm buildings that were full of our enemy that were holding hostages?
So me personally, no, I did not. But yes, that did happen, throughout a lot in Iraq for sure. But I have no doubt in Afghanistan, certainly after it cooked back up. Probably not in the beginning and during the slow years, but certainly after when it picked up, I have no doubt. But I know for a fact that happened in Iraq. Again, I didn't personally, but yes, every building I went in had bad guys in it, right? Let's caveat to that. That's if we got there quick enough that they hadn't already walked out. You know what I mean? And so, but that situation absolutely does happen. And certainly with your tier 1 elements, I know for a fact those kind of things have happened. And, the question is always going to be just like in this in Mumbai, as Ted mentioned or whoever, it took them 2 days to even get that team there. You would hope if this now 10 or 15 different cities in the United States, that's going to be another problem to tackle if it all happened at once too. But I would hope that we would have some other assets that may be able to drop in there and take care of that if necessary. Because one of the things that you didn't talk about, which we've already have many times, there's going to be a secondary one in there, supposedly, right? They're not going to just hit those soft targets. Then they're going to have some other devices waiting for the police to show up. Because again, your EMS and firefighters are not going to show up until the police come there and secure that area. And they're going to have attacks for them, which will be a secondary attack, and then deplete the police force of those folks right there, and then move to the tier 1. So I think it's, I don't know, it's a pretty serious deal. It's pretty scary, in fact, to think about it.
So, Jeff, I'm just curious what your thoughts are as far as vulnerabilities in our coastal cities that could allow terrorists to essentially get a beachhead just like they did in Mumbai. Do we have any protection that would stop that you can think of? You're on mute.
No, I mean, we got the Coast Guard and stuff, but they would have to probably come in from a ship that's out to sea, a mothership, so to speak. Because the only place around us that a foreign country or anything come in from would be maybe Cuba and then Mexico if you came around down there. We've got 3,000 miles between us and Europe and even more on the other direction. Now over there in India, they could have just, Pakistan and India are right next to each other and the water's on both. It wouldn't have been that big of a deal. And if they went out, like I said, they hijacked this trawler, just go out to the fishing grounds, find an Indian boat, board it, kill everybody, and drive it home. They potentially could do the same thing here, but they're not that close to begin with. And clearing a building like that is a really complex thing because you've got survivors there, you've got hostages you got to consider. I remember in Afghanistan, I wasn't there for it before I got there, but we had a bunch of Pakistani Al-Qaeda guys, and they got left behind by the Arab Al-Qaeda guys, and they got into it, the Northern Alliance, and they'd hold up in this former girls' school, and they wouldn't come out, and they actually shot at some of the killed a couple of village elders who tried to negotiate them, and they just dropped a 1,000-pound Mark 83 on them, and that solved that problem. But you can't do that in a city with your own people in the building.
Yeah. So, Ted, pivoting to you here, how do you think our local law enforcement's response time and capabilities would look like compared to what happened initially in Mumbai? I don't know that we're really prepared for it. I don't think we're prepared for it at all, but I'll defer if you have intelligence that says otherwise.
No, I don't have any extra intelligence other than I think it depends on the type of city. I think if you got a blue state, it's going to be slower. They're going to ask questions and not want to label it as a terrorist attack. It reminds me of that song of Jason Aldean's, Not in My Town. You come to the South, or, you know, there was just an incident at one of the churches, and I can't remember if it was in Texas or not, where a guy came in and started shooting, and they took him out now, you know, because the people were prepared. And I think that's the big thing. You get a population like India or some of these other countries that's disarmed, and they don't have the firepower that the Americans do. It's a different story. But here, I know too many, including myself. I mean, we're armed, we're prepared, and God forbid we ever have to do that. But you know, I know we will engage when needed. And I think, to answer your question, I think the red states, more rural, you'll have faster response. And the blue states, they're gonna, like I said, they're gonna pivot and not want to call it a terrorist attack. They don't want to offend anybody. But in the meantime, people die. So, you know, this goes back to elections and who you vote for. It really does have a consequence. And the people in America need to wake up. We've been blessed too long. With, you know, I mean, I agree that things are going to change here, or that sure all the cards are in play, where it looks like, you know, an attack is imminent.
Yeah, unfortunately, it sure does. But it kind of happens when you leave the door wide open for 4 years and let everybody come in the country. I forgot to mention one thing, that when Randy was talking, Khalid published some intel Command 11 yesterday that showed some of the stuff that's going on in Syria. And essentially the bad guys were holding up inside of people's homes and using the poor, you know, civilians as shields. You know, it's pretty disgusting behavior. But the other thing that you tweaked me on, Ted, is look at what happened in New Orleans on January 1st. The FBI girl who has zero law enforcement experience, has a degree in gender studies, gets up and says, this was not a terrorist attack. She walks away. She walks away. The chief of police comes up and says that it was definitely a terrorist attack. I mean, just unbelievable. So, Sal, you've again studied this topic in depth, and this is a fairly open-ended question. Take your time with it. But how do you think the timeline of a similar attack would unfold in America in one of these mid-tier cities? And at what point do you think civilians would be on their own?
So time is going to be the enemy when this starts, because they are going to, depending on how good the law enforcement and the resources are in the given city, is going to determine how long there's any kind of serious response to start taking place. So I think civilians, and every time I do, you know, podcasts or all my writing, etc., I address the armed citizen, concealed carrier, right? And even all the GWAT veterans, that's what you are now when you're walking around, right? So I think we need to think about this kind of thing happening in two phases. There is going to be the initial attack, and if they have learned from Mumbai and then Paris after that, and a few other things as well, the theater attack in Russia, etc., there's been similar incidents, but Mumbai really kicked off this kind of scenario. If they do it better, there's probably going to be a more coordinated hit of those multiple locations. And if what comes to pass, what these really trustworthy intelligence assets, you know, like Khalid and others are saying, we're going to look at a better Mumbai done in multiple cities. And it's very terrifying. So how you need to think about it, the initial phase is when it first kicks off and you're in public. You're not going to be there with a plate carrier on and your AR-15 with your 5 buddies, you know, also with all the same stuff. That's not going to happen. At best, you might be in the transit station, the mall, some area that is a crowded public place that is chosen as one of the first places they're going to hit. And it's going to be 2 guys, 4 guys, you know, however these cells are broken down. And, at best, you're going to be armed with your handgun. Hopefully you are. And where the game can change, though, for the American citizen concealed carrier, you're not going to take out 12 terrorists with, your Smith & Wesson shield, right? But where it changes, in the article I sent you, Chris, I made a note about this. If you look at the Taj Mahal, which was kind of the last convergence in the Mumbai attack, were actually 4 of those terrorists. It was 4 or 6. They divided into groups of 2, the initial 10. And it was, I think, only 4 eventually arrived at the hotel and did all the slaughter that happened in the hotel. Well, there were numerous incidents in the Taj where people would try to get out of the exits only to be cut off by 1 or 2 of these savages who would open fire on them to herd them back in. The same thing happened at the Bataclan Theater in Paris, where people tried to escape through the exits, where almost 100 people were killed just in that theater by 3 guys who came in. It's at that point of egress where you, as the armed citizen concealed carrier, now has a resource at your disposal that all of these helpless, disarmed people around the world do not have. And that is the ability to put a couple through the tee box of the guy who stands between you and your family from exiting the building. So that's phase 1. Get the hell out of there. And if you have to burn 1 or 2 guys down to do it on your way out, that's the only gunfight that's realistically achievable here. Again, you're not going to go hunting a bunch of terrorists throughout the mall with just your handgun, right? But the weapon can give you, if you're good with it, can give you the ability to get you and yours out. And then get home. And if you can't get home, get somewhere that's defensible and ride it out to phase 2. Whenever the cavalry comes in. And God knows in our society, if you're in places where you have GWAT veterans who have a community together, I wouldn't doubt that the first guys who arrive there to start killing terrorists are those guys. Once they have an opportunity to rendezvous and say, what's happening here? Let's go into town and get this thing straightened out. But, my perspective is for the concealed carrier, it's that phase 1 that is the real dangerous part. You got to get your people out. Being armed with your pistol can dramatically change things for you. It can be the game changer. And then certainly if you can get home where you have your real guns and, barricade the doors and ride this thing out with your family.
So the graphic I had here, clearly it's an eye test, and we're not going to read everything off. This is the timeline, but I wanted to show the sophistication and the complexity of this operation that happened in Mumbai. And this was all by design. None of this was, a fluke. And when you look at the map for the area where things happen, you've got them essentially coming ashore here and then moving in this direction down to the last stuff, which is the Jewish center and the hotels here. So they had a very clear path, a very clear goal that they were looking at. No, by the way, Sal, when you mentioned having to fight to get past 1 or 2 guys, and also what happened in France, I think it was last night or night before, I mentioned that a lot of people in Israel on 10/7 got in their cars, were trying to leave the venue, and there was a guy dressed up as a cop who stopped them, and everybody thought, oh, well, it's a cop. And he said something to the effect, stay here, we have this under control. And then Hamas jumped out of the bushes on either side and slaughtered everybody while they were sitting in their cars. That intelligence, as far as, people being dressed up as the bad guys is that's the scary stuff. Because you think that it's somebody who's on your team. So moving along in things here. So we've got some surveillance camera stuff here. I'm going to play a couple of them. I can't play all of them because, believe it or not, some of these would get us flagged for gratuitous violence. But I believe this first one here is one of the very first ones. Let's get it to pull up here.
Certain about what we're going to see over here, but as you can see, these are the initial stages when all of this started happening, that hostage scenario unfolded. It's a very busy street outside the Taj at Colaba, and as we can see over there, some security personnel evidently taking up positions. We're not entirely sure if this is a terrorist or a security personnel we are seeing, but this is footage from 10:16 in the evening. It's exclusive on this channel. We'll try and understand what this footage actually is. It seems to be perhaps a security personnel, member of the security personnel, in front of the hotel, and this is closed circuit footage that you see. That man armed with a 303 rifle, obviously from one of the local security agencies, local security forces, taking up positions soon after the first shots were heard at the Taj Hotel.
So, Sal, based on your comments, what do you think the likelihood would have been of somebody interdicting that bad guy who had his back to the street and the crowd if it was to happen here?
Yeah, absolutely. Another good example is one of the attack sites in the Paris attack was a cafe out on the street. And one single gunman opened fire. I think he killed over 20 people just at that location. Well, he opened fire, shot out the windows, then he just stepped over the glass and walked in. So once again, okay, armed only with your handgun, yes, and you got a guy with a rifle. But if you're hiding behind the bar or a flipped over table and then that scumbag walks in, the odds are now in your favor. It's been done many times, neutralizing active killers in this country with only your handgun, right? So it's a total game changer. It's an absolute game changer. And if you look at a lot of these incidents, Mumbai, Paris, while you might be dealing with a lot of guys, they don't all cluster together. You're not having 12 dude. If they have any tactics at all, they're not going to do that. They tend to break off in groups of one or two. And that's likely what you're going to encounter where you're trying to escape. So being armed, carry your gun, people. My God, carry your gun, carry an extra magazine, and pay attention to what's going on around you. And it can be a complete game changer. And I would agree, Chris, something like this, if it happens anywhere that is, let's say, leans more red, where people actually have their God-given rights, I think things might peter out a lot quicker.
Well, I mean, off the top of my head, I can name a couple instances in the DFW area where one was a church on the west side of Fort Worth, and the older gentleman, one shot, took the guy out who came in and attacked the church with a shotgun. Unfortunately, there were a couple of victims. Then the other one was at some sort of art center. It might have been in Irving, somewhere near the Dallas.
It was in Kylene.
That was
Texas.
Garland. It was
Garland. I'm sorry, Garland. That's right. Yeah.
That's it, yeah. An off-duty cop who was working as a rent-a-cop took out the bad guys. But check this out. So this is surveillance footage there. So these would be guys like yourself, Randy, commandos, Green Berets, et cetera. When you look at the way things went down, there just seemed to be a lot of people standing around, not even reacting, Randy. It looked like they just went into condition black, a good number of them. A question for you: when Baghdad fell and all hell broke loose, you had people looting, then you had marauders, and it took us a few weeks to get it under control. And I want to say we had 300,000 troops there. What's the SOP? What's the protocol for you guys as Green Berets? How do you take control of a situation that's just complete and utter chaos?
Well, as I had mentioned before, it didn't really matter in the beginning, right? Because all that's command driven, and that comes from all the way from the president to the Pentagon and on down. And basically they, in Baghdad, in that case, they told us, let them loot. So for 3 solid days, they were able to steal every single thing. But after that, then it was just a matter of, you had to apply force. And then let them know now that wasn't going to be allowed. As far as a Green Beret team, you know what I mean? That's a different scenario. And would go back to the very beginning of Afghanistan before conventional units hit the ground. Those first 90 days when we took the country, that was all done by special operation. Well, the agency, the tier 1 unit elements, and then Green Berets. That's who did that in those 90 days. And then, the Green Berets were there to train all the local indigenous, right? And so then that was the force that we used. And the whole story really is, because you got to realize when you get there, man, those guys didn't have weapons. You know, they had hose and shovels and stuff like that. So we had to arm them, train them. We even fed them, you know, and basically trained them and then took their country back. And that, but again, you have to use force when it certainly at a level that big. Like if New York City would be no different. If all of a sudden there was no law there and everything fell, it's human nature. It wasn't a Iraqi or Baghdad thing. That's a human nature thing. And I'm telling you, when I say biblical proportions, Baghdad looked like an ant pile that had been disturbed. And that's how many people, every street was full of vehicles, of carts, of people. Any way they could transport things out, that's exactly what they did. And you're not going to just stop that by asking them.
Yeah, you think?
Were you pretty pleased? Stop? Yeah.
So, Jeff, I don't know if you had a chance to pull up some of the documentation, but this was the after action report, the AAR, that was done by the authorities in Mumbai. It's a 72-page document. You can see
I did not read that.
It's really, really long. I mean, to get through stuff like this myself, I just drop it onto an AI and ask it to summarize it for me. And I'm not going to read the summary because we've already covered that information. But here's my question for you. This AAR is literally a blueprint to reproduce exactly what they did in Mumbai. It lists every single step that they went through. It couldn't be more documented. And, you know, I believe in the First Amendment super strongly. I don't believe in security through obscurity. So I think you got to put this information out there and hope that more good guys are aware than bad guys. But we do get emails from people saying that we shouldn't even be mentioning stuff like this because we're training the bad guys. Where's the fine line in between what should be put out and what shouldn't be put out?
Well, I mean, we're not training the bad guys. They already did this. This is history at this point. And you're worried about the future. And putting out an after-action report like that, yeah, does it tell somebody this is how they did it? Maybe we can do the same. But you would like to think that the security forces read this and say, okay, here's where we made our mistakes. This is what we're not going to do next time. We're going to have different tactics. We're going to have different weapons. We're going to have different deployment schedules. We're going to have more people spread out. You know, that you're going to correct it. Yeah, I would like to think that after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, we kind of figured out, and they wouldn't be able to bomb it again a year later. But you know, people need to know. First of all, they need to know what worked, what didn't work, and you know, did people screw up? You know, I think of Uvalde. You know, you hear about what happened down there in Texas, and you're like, okay, somebody needs to be canned for this. And you need to reward good people and hold bad people accountable. But it needs to be out. There needs to be transparency, so people can be prepared. They know what happened, and they can say to themselves, "Okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to do what those guys did." Or as Sal said, "Man, go healed. You know, you should be carrying."
Yeah. So Ted, same question to you. Where do you draw the line on the details that are given out?
I think I agree with Randy. You know, I think just go ahead and put them out there. You know, people are going to find that stuff. Bad people are going to do bad things. The difference in our country, and I am so blessed to be here, and I know you guys feel the same way, is we have a Second Amendment. And that Second Amendment is there for a reason. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. This is something we need to drive home from first grade or whenever it's appropriate. Teach people what the Constitution and the amendments are about, because we will be prepared. And if not, bad things are going to happen, as you've seen go on in these other countries. But as far as the information, I'm not one for withholding information. I think you put the information out so people say, dang, that happened. We need to tighten up, you know, and be more vigilant in our right. You know, and it comes down to responsibility as a citizen. You know, you don't enjoy the liberties and freedoms we have without being educated and willing to stand up and protect those.
Yeah, I agree, Ted. And I like this comment from Tyler Schutz. Notice in the documentary how they said the police were no match for the terrorists. This is why you are your own first responder. And I see, one video after another of, police interdictions happening, and they've got their Glock 19 or Glock 17, and the gangbangers have AKs and ARs.
Yeah.
This makes me
And
shake.
the cartel members.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to caveat off that, Chris, because we have had that topic come up in here a few episodes back. Someone challenged us that way. I can speak for myself, but I've heard Jeff speak many times, and I've heard, the times I've been on with Mike Glover and these folks. There isn't anything we haven't been disclosed that hasn't been published.
Right.
That's a fact. So all these, including those threat matrix that we put out, those were already published before we even discussed it. And that's what the enemy is talking about they're going to do already. Right. It's nothing that we're now bringing something new to the show and teaching them, because believe me, folks, that's what Green Berets do, is they teach other, not terrorists, supposedly, but it's called foreign internal defense. So we train other armies. We train other, just like I said, we trained the local indigenous we used in Afghanistan. And that is part of that. So, it's how you get things done, for one thing, but it's also how you build rapport with them, right? Because we don't want to do it all for everybody. We would it's like we were discussing last night, I think it was. It's why we didn't want to have to kill bin Laden in the very beginning. We were hoping that the Afghans would step up and help us do that, and they just didn't. So it's going to be up to us to get it done.
Well, while you were saying that, I was thinking to myself, give a man a fish, you feed him for the day, teach him how to fish.
There you go.
Similar type of
so we're not training any terrorist on anything that they don't already know. We're just making you guys aware of it.
Yeah, and that's totally true. It's 100%. We've got our fair share of hate mail over that in the past. We're not training anybody, not even close. But anyway, so there's part of that AAR, the after action report, is based on stuff like Kassab's confession. So if you download, or if you click on the link that I sent out for Grok, which is a summary of a ton of this stuff, under the transcript of the entire ordeal, you'll see the first one where Kassab's confession transcript is included, and you can read through it. There's the documentary that I showed a little bit of earlier, as far as David Headley being, the perfect terrorist, and some other collateral down there as well. But I want to move over to this video here, and it's a couple minutes long. If memory serves me right, I watched so many videos today. I think the most of the values towards the end, but I'll start at the beginning. We'll see how it goes.
Terrible events in Mumbai a year ago. India exercised what I believe most observers would say was rather remarkable restraint. As you look back on that decision not to respond or retaliate militarily, do you believe it was the right decision? And if, for God forbid, but if it were to happen that there were future terrorist acts against India, do you think that restraint may have come at a cost?
Well, let me say there was enormous pressure on me at that time. I resisted that pressure, and I think the decisions that I and our government took was, on balance, the right decision.
It is very difficult to stop every single terrorist attack. The steps that have been taken by our government over the last couple of years are quite profound steps. The improvement in our intelligence, the way we think about fighting terrorism, the ideas that we have to fight terrorism at the local level, we have improved in leaps and bounds. But terrorism is something that is impossible to stop all the time. There is an attack on Bombay that has taken place, but you would not have heard of all the attacks that have been stopped. So it is something that we will fight. It is something that we will defeat. And it is something that we work towards. But it is very, very difficult to stop every single terrorist attack. You feel that the US has stopped all terrorist attacks? I mean, the US is currently, except the US is currently involved in Afghanistan and in Iraq, where there are attacks every single day on them. Not in US, but on them. So there, the war is moved. So the war is taking place. Yeah, the war is taking place. Their soldiers are now taking the brunt. But it is they're fighting in Afghanistan and they're losing people in Afghanistan. Point is that we will stop 99% of attacks, but 1% of attacks.
So I'm going to stop that there and get your feedback, Sal.
Yeah, I mean, I think he hit it right there at the end. We'll stop 99% of them, but 1% will slip through, and that's all it's going to take. And that has been so complicated in our country due to the past 4+ years of the open borders, the amount of gotaways. You've got 2 million people who we have no idea where they even are. If even a minute fraction of them are the bad guys that we're concerned about here, they're all over the country. They're working with impunity. Think about the communications, just being able to communicate now via text, etc., and it's not being tracked. If you look at Mumbai, you had the cell actually came in on a boat because, again, they were foreign actors to the country. We're going to be dealing with a threat that is here and has likely been here for years, knows the terrain, knows, the networks within the community that they're using, etc. And we are perhaps on the verge, and it's terrifying for us to think about. I hope people realize, as you keep talking about this with panels of people, Chris, nobody's hoping this happens, right? Everybody is hoping that we're absolutely wrong. But if you're going to be realistic about this, with the enemies that we have in this world, and having just, our pants down for 4 years, I really think it's inevitable. And the only question is going to be this 1%er that makes it through is likely to be absolutely enormous. And if it's going to be a matter of how many spots in a given city, maybe how many cities, we're looking at a very terrifying thing. Multiple cities, possibly with multiple locations hit. So think of Mumbai playing out in multiple places. And terrifyingly, it might be a much more efficient, polished Mumbai this time.
Well, and a lot bigger numbers. So Khalid's intel, and he feeds a lot of intel to Sarah Adams. She's quoted this number as well. 12,000 Al-Qaeda inside our borders already. 12,000. So this is what 10 guys did in one city over the course of 60 hours. Imagine what 12,000 could do. Not that they would all be fighters. Some of them, of course, would be support personnel. Do you want to add something to that, Sal?
No, I was just thinking, what if it's just 1,000? This was 10 guys, what they did in Mumbai. What if it's 1,000? What if it's just 100 who, hit a couple of cities? I'll use this example. And you guys have talked about multiple examples of like active killers and stuff that shut everything down. One I haven't heard mentioned is the guy who attacked the police in Dallas. Was that about 9 or 10 years ago? He killed 5 police officers. One guy with a rifle and a plate carrier and the guts to do it literally shut that entire city down for 12 hours.
Yeah,
that's one guy.
That was 2020, and then they used a robot to get him.
Yes.
But now they've outlawed that. You can't even do it.
You're right. Yeah, it was 2020 on the heels of the Summer of Love. That's right. Yeah, so not that long ago. But there's an example. One guy, he had a bit of training. He had a rifle and was wearing a plate carrier, and it's one guy. And as our experts have talked about previously on the show, Chris, that they foresee this plan of having dedicated guys in the cell who will attack law enforcement. That would be the genius thing to do, because if you look at Dallas, one guy was able to consume all law enforcement resources for 12 hours until they killed him with a robot. Imagine the damage that could be done in that duration by the rest of the guys in the cell who are running around now, not impeded by law enforcement at all.
So let me just pivot over to another thing quickly, because somebody asked about as well. But Khalid's group broke the intelligence. You can see the date here, April the 11th, 2025, on hospitals being targeted in mid-tier cities, tier 1 hospitals, trauma centers. And it didn't really get out there until a couple weeks ago, and then there were all these people who are surprised. But you can see the wealth of information that Khalid published in April on it. Then he did an update, and here it is. And the reason I'm showing it right now, somebody was asking about it, and I'll put links to these in the chat in just a minute. But look what's on the list of cities right there that's a potential target for Al-Qaeda's next attack on the homeland, where they hit 10 to 15 tier 2 cities at a time. Dallas is one of them. So, I mean, that's, if one guy did to Dallas what you just described, what does, 100 guys do in Dallas? It'd be catastrophic, absolutely catastrophic. So backing up from there, check this out. Look at the date on this, July 31st, 2025. So you had the American Headley, who was on site for a couple years in Mumbai, working out the logistics, the tactical piece of the attack in 2008. But the guy who was the mastermind behind it is this guy right here, publishing videos on TikTok as recently as yesterday, and basically telling people, educating people on how to attack, how to become a terrorist, all these sort of things. He's got a whole bunch of them. I'm not going to play it because we're running long on time, but if you go look at the original stuff that I gave everybody, it's there. But that just strikes me as really crazy. So let's get into the home stretch and start to wrap this up. So the whole premise of tonight is that what happened in Mumbai with 10 people, 2008, has been used as a blueprint by terrorists around the world now. Al-Qaeda, I'll show you, we have some intelligence from DHS that flat out states that Al-Qaeda is using the Mumbai incident for their next attacks on America. But in between, we had an attack in 2015 on France, which Sal had already mentioned. And I'll go to you first on this one, Jeff. But I won't bore people by reading this whole article because I can sum it up pretty quickly. The 2015 attack on Paris was specifically modeled on what happened in 2008 in Mumbai, and there's all kinds of supporting evidence to that. I mean, we're literally teaching, or that one event's literally teaching the bad guys how to get away with outright murder in Western civilizations, countries. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, and we saw it too in the Russia and the Moscow attack as well, where they took over the symphony of the opera house or whatever it was, and they secured the exits and killed a whole bunch of people until the Russians came in and gassed them all with fentanyl, basically. But yeah, this isn't new. They're just refining old tactics and making them better. And weren't people like, oh, you're giving them ideas? No. We got the ideas from them. We got it from studying their actions. But as a society, we need to be aware that this is how they do. This is how they work. This is what they do, and it'll probably never happen to you. But if it does, you better be prepared to deal with it one way or the other. And ideally, you get away, but you're armed, so you can defend yourself and your family and the lives of others as well. And if you take out one or two of the bad guys in the process, good on you. But just curling up in the fetal position and hoping the police are going to come get you out of there, you're gone. That isn't going to work.
Randy, I want to get your thoughts on the attack in France being modeled on Mumbai.
Well, you look at when you showed demographics earlier, like where they started, they landed on the beach and then just basically went one direction to cover all those targets. And guess what? They used the same thing we use in the middle of the night. And what is that? Surprise and violence of action wins the day every time. And so, and on a civilian population, man, I'm going to tell you, I've seen how well it works on militaries and then some of these terrorists. It's still just as effective on them too, right? So now doing it on civilians, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. You know what I mean? And it is going to come down to, again, where they do that, and then what are the local assets. And I think, as mentioned by a couple of panelists already, you do that in some of the cities, certainly down south. Even if you did something, on one that's not Dallas, because, yes, they shut down Dallas during that 12 hours, but I would hope that they had learned something. The population is much bigger. There's a lot more assets. Although you got to go back to that one attack. I'd forgotten that it really shut the place down for 12 hours. That's pretty crazy. A bigger attack would be different. But it's going to come down to that initial reaction, as we've already spoke. You know, if you can shut down that surprise and violence of action in the middle of it, is generally the only way. If you don't, then there's going to be some damage, and it's going to continue. And as this thing develops, as I think Sal mentioned earlier, time is not on our side as that keeps going, right? It's just going to get worse if someone's not able to deal with that in the middle of that taking place. So, you know, that's going to come down to where it is, I suppose, and how it's dealt with.
I appreciate that, Randy. So, Sal, again, just because you've taken a keen interest in Mumbai for a number of years now, do you have anything you can share as far as European security forces adapting since Paris? And is there anything we can learn from them? I'll show you quickly. This was a post I made early this morning on Substack. I did it on X as well. But basically, my message is we're not ready for coordinated terror attacks, and we got to get our shit together like yesterday. And so I put down some bullets here: training cops for multi-shooter, multi-site attacks, teach civilians to control bleeding, run real full-scale interagency terror drills, launch national fight, flight, fix awareness campaigns. Essentially, don't wait for the next 10/7 or next Mumbai. I don't think that on a very large level we've learned anything from this, but I'm interested to hear what you've got to say.
Fun fact, I was in Brussels, Belgium, exactly 1 week prior to the Paris attack, and the cell that did that came out of that city. And what was very interesting is while I was there, that's the first time I had ever been in Brussels. I was asking my coworker, I said, is it always like this? There were soldiers with rifles all over the streets. And he said, no, this is unusual. This is really high level law enforcement. They're obviously looking for something. Thank God I was out of there and not there the following week, because of course every airport in Europe shut down, right? Following that Paris attack. So Europe, you know, just seeing what I saw go on there in Belgium, if they know something's coming, they're out in force. And I'm sure France learned a lot in how to directly deal with the problem. The problem, though, is unless you want to live in a police state where you have soldiers on every corner standing with rifles, and Americans do not accept that. Europeans accept that, seeing guys with rifles on the corner. Americans do not. Okay, so I think inevitably we have to accept the fact that time is the enemy. When they first move, we're going to be at the total disadvantage, and it's going to be a game of catch up. That's why the Mumbai model is, I'm convinced, is what they will use. A lot of people have said it's going to look like October 7th. I don't think so. And the reason for that is the reason Hamas did that is that was what was in striking distance, those small towns, etc. And that was the model that worked for that attack. In the United States, they're going for optics. Unless they go to the absolutely most blue of the blue urban environments, they're going to run into a gun in at least every other house. And the optics are not going to be good when they, you know, kick down 2 or 3 doors, and by the 4th door, they come in on a guy who's barricaded in there with his AR-15 and kills the whole cell, right? So I don't think it's feasible at all. But the Mumbai design, if they hit the right urban areas with that, yes, eventually it'll be put down. And yes, there may be some armed citizens who shoot a few here or there in the face. But man, for the first few hours, the amount of carnage they can pull off with a few guys with rifles is staggering. Yeah. So I don't know if Europe is necessarily any better at intercepting this, and we certainly are not either.
Yeah, appreciate that, Sal. So, Jeff, question for you. I'm trying to get us into the home stretch here. What, in your opinion, what soft targets do we have in our country that resemble in some element those that were hit in Mumbai and Paris? And how can we better protect them? Like, in other words, what are the things that you see as deficient that would be easily implemented fixes?
Yeah, you could, like, not sound political, you take any blue city that has gun control, first of all, because you minimize the chance of anybody shooting back at you. You pick a large venue like a concert or something like that, where people are going to have to go through metal detectors because there's no weapons allowed inside. And if you're a terrorist, all you got to do, you don't even have to go inside. You can just shoot all the people lined up to get in, because you're saying, well, they're all densely packed in there. They're all, one big mass of people, and I'm pretty much guaranteeing none of them have guns. And if there is security, it's on the other side of them because it's checking them for entering the building. But if you get them before they enter the building, and there's 300 or 400 people out there, like there is for any basketball game, any concert, anything like that, it's slim pickings. I mean, it's great pickings, but then slim chance that you're going to be interdicted, and then you also have a chance of escaping in the mayhem of the crowd, because people are going to scatter, they're going to run in panic, and you run with them.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So I'm just going to bring up the tail end of the document on Grok that I've shared the link with for everybody, because we're running a little bit tight on time. But I do want to mention the final section at the bottom, links to intelligence indicating Al-Qaeda using the Mumbai attack is a blueprint for upcoming attacks on the U.S. homeland. So there's the lessons of Mumbai from 2009. There's U.S. Senate hearing. There's a couple transcripts here. There's a Times article that's web archived, so you don't have to pay to read it. And there's also House hearings on the Mumbai attacks that have lots of information showing that the bad guys are essentially using this as the blueprint, as we've mentioned. If you go to our Substack, so survivaldispatch.news, and this video that you see up top, that goes away after we're done the video. It's only up there when you're live. If you click on this article, the top article, and scroll down, there's some assets here for you. So when you get to, sorry, it's the actual video page. It's right. Dang it. It's on a different page. My apologies. It's the one that we did Wednesday. Dang it. All right. Sorry. This one, the one with global jihad rising. There's this diagram shows relationships between all the different groups. But the important thing is this right here. We have a guide on how to protect yourself and your family from the next terrorist attacks on the homeland. It's completely for free. So if you go to survivaldispatch.news, sign up for free. You get our daily SITREPs. You get all kinds of good stuff like this on a daily basis. If you decide to sign up, it's $7.99 a month or $75 a year. You get 2.5 months for free. And what you get extra for that is you get enrolled in our SDN system, Survival Dispatch Emergency Notification System. You get access to our super high traffic signal chat, which is a private chat that sometimes has as many as 3,000 messages a day. You get our entire library, 37 Survival Dispatch Insider e-magazines that normally sell for $10 a piece. So it's $370 for $7.99 membership. You get early access to instructional videos from JJ Morris. You get the Sunday Threat Matrix newsletter. And for these daily SITREPs, when you get to my signature right here, the paying members get all of our sources down below. But I really wanted to draw attention to this PDF here because it's got a wealth of information in it. Share it with your friends and your circle. Knock on wood, they don't need it, but if they do, that's something good for them to have. So Sal, walk us through this article. This is the final thing that we're going to share today. So Looming Terrorism, a Survival Plan for the Armed Citizen. I'm going to put the link in the live chat in just a second. So this is an article that Sal did based on everything he learned in his studies on Mumbai and other studies of his. And as you can see, it's very, very comprehensive. So I want to give you a chance, Sal, to describe it. Then Randy and Jeff, you can weigh in on it. And we're going to put a lid on this thing after that.
Yeah, so just to hit some of the highlights of it, and we talked about quite a bit of this. I started that article, I wrote it in May, and I start the article talking about a lot of the intelligence that's now out there, Scott Mann, Sarah Adams, etc., talking about this stuff. a lot of talk about it's going to look like October 7th. So in the beginning of the article, I say I don't think so for the reasons I already said. And I think it's going to look like Mumbai and Paris, and likely in multiple cities. So then I go into just, again, the survival plan for you, the individual armed citizen, your concern for yourself and your loved ones. There's going to be no heroic activity of saving the whole mall filled with people or whatever. This first wave of things happening, your priority is the life of your loved ones who are with you, right? So at first I talk about avoidance. I know we want to live our lives and do the fun stuff. If you can choose between the fun stuff being going to the concert where you're disarmed and in there like packed like sardines with 100,000 people, or if the other fun activity could be going to the lake with the family, I really just encourage people, avoid those big crowds where you're disarmed. Man, just do that for the next few months. We have very credible people saying they really think if this happens, it's going to be within 2025, right? From there, know the exits, know what's going on around you, wherever you are. And that's where I go into the examples of the Bataclan Theater in France, in the Paris attack, as well as what happened in the Taj Mahal. Because as the armed citizen armed with a handgun, you're not going to be shooting it out with a whole cell of guys and win that fight. However, the fight you can win is what we saw over and over again in both of those attacks, is where people actually confronted the terrorists. It was one or two guys at any given time when they were cutting off exits. And that's a fight you can win with your handgun. Get the hell out of there, get home if possible. And the article finishes up with talking about the home defense plan. If floods and hurricanes can cut people off for up to a month from help, imagine what a mass scale event like this could cut you off for. You have to be able to sustain in the home. And obviously you need the protect your family, but beyond that, all the things that you need to sustain. What if somebody's injured? You know how to deal with that for a long-term period. And even at ground zero, an example that comes to mind is the Pulse nightclub attack that happened in Florida. For hours, first responders did not come in. They didn't know where the guy was in the building, etc. And for hours, people laid on the floor of the restrooms bleeding to death. If you have to barricade, hopefully armed with at least your handgun so you can kill anybody who comes through the door into the restroom, what if you have a loved one who's bleeding to death with you? A femoral artery wound and you have a tourniquet on you, you know what? They can survive, hopefully, till first responders can finally reach them. You have to have this game plan. You have to have the gear on you. You have to have the home equipped with the gear. You have to, the last thing I'll mention, Chris, is I go into the need to have a link up plan with your loved ones. If you're at ground zero, let's say you have older children, teenage children, and you're all at whatever, the movie theater, the mall. If something happens, where do we meet up? Okay. And your older kids, and certainly your spouse, etc., should know those things, right? And the answer is likely not at the vehicle in the parking lot. We've seen too often what happens is in terror attacks, and the Columbine killers, by the way, tried to do this, is they have explosives in a vehicle in the parking lot waiting for first responders. Those two psychopaths who shot up Columbine High School actually did that. Fortunately, their bombs didn't work. Their the new timers they had or whatever, didn't set the bombs off. So, if you're at a big public place, if you're seeing a show or at the county fair or something, have the quick conversation. If something goes down, you get out, and we're going to meet at the 7-Eleven over there across the highway, something like that. You want to be far away from the scene where you can all link up again and hopefully get home from there.
Yeah, distance equals safety. So I have 3 questions, one for each of you. You first, Randy. So what specific training should armed citizens pursue to prepare for a multi-attacker scenario like we've been discussing?
Well, I think the biggest thing is a lot of what we've already been saying, and Sal just covered, everything we've been saying in the last, I don't know, maybe 10 episodes, and a lot of the same exact things, right? Have the plan, your primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency plans. You can never just have one plan. I don't think people plan for these type of things, or like he just mentioned, if everybody's at school and work when this kicks off, how does everybody link back up? You know what I mean? I think having your family kind of practice or walk through some of those drills probably isn't a bad thing. It's not always just going to the range and pew pew time. Well, although that would also help, you know what I mean? Being familiar with your weapon systems, whatever those are, how to use them, how to clean them, how to change them out, how to, unload it, how to load it, as simple as all that sounds, because the fact is, you're going to, if you're put in the position, and most of us won't be, that you are the one person that may be able to stop one or two of these guys, you're going to want to be proficient at that, right? But beyond that, most of us are going to be trying to get somewhere. So again, it's going to come down to that planning that I talked about and running through some of those drills with your family, because the reason they're going to use the Mumbai layout and the way that Paris and all these other were, and even October 7th was to a certain degree, but Sal's right. It's because they had to come and cross over the border and get to what we'll call the low-hanging fruit was, right? Where we know these people are already here. They probably don't have to do that. So that'll change a little bit. But you think about how successful it was, not only in, the operations of it, they pulled it off fairly easily, but look how well it worked in the press and the media. That stuff was in the press and media forever. And for terrorists, that's a big time win. That's how they draw more people in. Certainly, as around the world, more people, more and more, certainly our youth become disenfranchised. So really, it's practicing those drills of what you need to take and what you're going to do and what everybody's going to do. If you're at work and at school, if y'all are at an event, any of those scenarios, there's 3 or 4 that you probably should work out simple little plans of how you're going to get together if it goes down when y'all are scattered out anyway. So I think that's what, yeah.
Thanks, Randy. From the armed citizen standpoint, I would point out that if you have never shot while under stress, you will be completely ineffective in a scenario as Sal's describing. There's a video we like to show, Lumberton, North Carolina, carjacker jumps in an F350. The door is open. Good Samaritan who's working on the construction site pulls his pistol, shoots 5 times from 5 feet away. All 5 shots miss. The carjacker backs the truck up about 50 yards, puts his toe into it, runs over the Good Samaritan and kills him. So if you've never shot with your heart rate 140 plus beats per minute, I would encourage you to try it. I do it on a regular basis. I train 5 days a week, where it's exercise, elevated heart rate, and shoot. And it took a long time and a lot of practice for me to get accurate. You lose your fine motor skills when you go into a high level of stress. So another way to simulate the stress is put your hands in a bucket of ice water for 60 seconds, then run your shooting drills and see how accurate you are not. 17% of shots fired by law enforcement officers last year actually hit the target. Less than 10% of shots fired by military, U.S. military, typically hits its target. And here's a number you can look up and verify quite easily. We shot 50,000 rounds in the Vietnam War per 1 KIA for the Viet Cong. So again, you can go to the range and familiarize yourself with, controls and dial your optic in, and that's all good stuff. That's not preparing you for an SHTF situation at all. We're into that condition black, right? So condition red, shit's hitting the fan. You're conditioned to it. Human beings don't rise to the occasion. They follow a level of training, but most people go into condition black. Last stat, because I haven't mentioned it in a while, 70% of Floridians who are killed by gunshot wound, who did not commit suicide, are shot with their own gun every single year. And why is that? They've never shot under stress. They pull their gun, they lock up, condition black, bad guy takes the gun away, shoots them, DRT. So don't fool yourself and think that you're going to the range, fire some ball ammo, and that you're prepared, you're good to go when the shit hits the fan like this. You have to take it to a whole other level of training if you want to be effective and if you're serious about protecting yourself and your family. Jeff, a question for you. How does the mindset for terrorist attack response differ from standard concealed carry defensive mindset? And I hope I set you up for that question.
Well, yeah, because concealed carry defensive thing is you got a bad guy in the store, someone's going to rob the store, you get caught up in it. He may not necessarily even be out there to kill a whole bunch of people, and he probably doesn't want to die in the process. But the problem with terrorists is, one, they're going in there with the intent purpose of killing as many people as they can. They're not going to hesitate. They're not going to care if it's a little kid. We saw the thing in Mumbai, killed a freaking pregnant woman, for crying out loud. And they're not afraid to die. In fact, they plan on it. So it's not your mindset, it's theirs, but you have to be prepared. You're going to have to take the guy down. There's none of this, let me shoot him in the leg and try and disarm him stuff. No, you're going to have to put center mass right there. And maybe, a couple more high in case he's wearing body armor. Because they're going into combat. That's the way they look at it. You got to be in combat too.
When I switched my concealed permit from Texas to Florida years ago, the cop who was doing the session, he said, shoot groin shot. He said, if they've got body panels on, most likely they don't have protection in their groin, and shoot them there. So anyway,
a lot of bleeders down there.
The thing is, getting anything on target under high stress is a deal, to itself, sort of thing. But Sal, last questions for you. What additional equipment beyond standard EDC should people be carrying or consider carrying in light of the threats and the intel that we have on them?
Yeah, past few months I've hit on this hard, so I'll offer you a couple of things to consider. Obviously, carry a gun you can really shoot well, you can really fight with. The micro pocket 380. Now's not the time. You know what I mean? Carry a real pistol, fighting pistol, and at least one reload on it. Something to consider, and most civilians don't do this, and I admit I do not do this most of the time, but there are some exceptions. If you have maybe a partner or older children who are often with you when in crowded places, but obviously don't or can't carry themselves, maybe start adding a backup gun. Put something on your ankle. If you have a teenage son who you've had to the range and he's trained, man, that could be a game changer if something kicks off and you tell the family, you hunker down here behind this hardcover and you hand that kid or your spouse that second gun, right? Well, then you take care of whatever's happening. Just something to consider. And again, for most civilian applications, it's out there. It's not as critical as obviously a uniformed police officer should absolutely carry a second gun on them, right? But now's the time to consider something like that. I would also submit that in modern fashion, in modern public places, everybody carries a backpack or sling bag, and it does not draw any attention. So why not capitalize on that? I have a sling bag that I absolutely love. I don't carry a gun in it. I like on-body carry, not bag carry. But in the bag, I have a couple more spare magazines. I've got a full trauma kit, medical gear, which is hard to carry everything you need on person, but in the bag, it's easy. And then, any other useful things as well. Why not capitalize on that? If you walk around in the mall, every guy and his brother has a laptop sling bag or, one of those new like leather fashionable ones. Get a good one, not covered with Molly that looks tactical. Just get a good one. And all those additional medical supplies, extra magazines, etc., you can have on person, and you can even throw a soft body armor panel in one of those bags. And if you have the time to then throw it on your front, it's not going to stop rifle fire, but the more mundane things you may run into, some junkie shooting off rounds in the mall, now you have some ballistic protection as well. I mean, my pack only weighs like 12 pounds with all that stuff in it. So something to consider, I think, for this day and age.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So just a couple quick comments before we go to the conflicted question of the night. And that is that if you have the opportunity to take a Stop the Bleed course workshop. I highly recommend it. Randy can attest to the fact that if you have a major bleed and you don't get it tied off in the blink of an eye, it goes downhill very, very quickly. And there's an old adage that if you can put holes in people, you should be able to plug holes in people as well. But stop the bleed would be one of my recommendations. And it's funny that Sal would mention body panels. And I've got a 4-minute video here from our good friend Denny Chapman before he moved back to Illinois. And I used to work with him every single day. He's wearing the ballista pack from Byrna. And so it looks like a kid's backpack, and it's got 2 3A panels in it and a quick deployment. So check this out. You reach over your head, you take the pull strap. Now the panel's in front of you. You've got a panel in the bag still behind you. And then there's Molly on it. And so you've got a holster and your pistol on it. Denny, of course, is a national champion, multiple different shooting classes. So again, I'm not going to play the whole thing, but let me get it to the point where this is unplanned, as you can see, by the way, and you can find it on our YouTube channel, easy enough. Oh, it must just be that beginning stuff. It's been a long time. Check this out.
On today's episode of Survival Dispatch Reviews, we're checking out the Byrna Ballista Pack.
How fast was that? Not too shabby, huh?
Yeah, that wasn't too bad.
Yeah. So interesting product. If I had kids in public school, which I would never do these days, I would be sending them with those book bags, by the way, with the 3A panels in them. We get a significant amount of our intelligence from Khalid Muhammad. He's a senior fellow at Command 11. They've got quite a team. Go to command11.com. If you want to see more on the hospital intel, I put it in the live chat, but it's easy to find on his homepage as well. You can find him on X, much like the rest of us. There's a fair bit of suppression, but it's just at Command 11, all one word. And again, if you go to survivaldispatchnews.com, you'll only see this video here when we're broadcasting live like we are right now. But we have a ton of free content. So sign up for free. You'll get our weekly watch guide. You get the daily SITREPs. You get other things in addition to that. And if you pay, you get all the value adds that I've already mentioned to you. What you also get out of the whole deal is it allows us to work, long hours to bring you truthful news, unlike the legacy media. And it's the same thing with our sponsors like Carnival. Randy and we can't keep Carnival in stock in our homes. This is right. Freeze-dried meat with a 25-year shelf life, no mRNA, no hormones, no antibiotics, grass finished. The idea is you stack it up for, when the shit hits the fan and you've got all this pure protein, high quality meat that doesn't have to be refrigerated. But my problem is I get hungry, I go to the kitchen, I reconstitute and I eat it. And Dean sends me a text. One of the guys who owns the company, he's like, "How you doing with Carnival?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's all gone. It just tastes so good. I ate the whole stockpile." So anyway, all right, moving on to the end here. This is from Dale. Dale, the prolific news poster on our Signal channel. It's the guy I don't think he sleeps. He's like Trump. He might sleep like 2-3 hours a night. The amount of information that he posts, especially really early in the morning, he gets up a little bit before I do, is just awesome. But this one was sent in from him. So Queers for Palestine, gay Palestinian Ahmad Abu something beheaded in the West Bank. And it just draws attention to the fact that these people, they live in their, whatever you want to call it, politically correct bubble here in America. And they've had their brains turned to shit by legacy media. And they think, we'll stand up for the Palestinians. Go over there, see what happens when you tell them that you're gay. Good things will not happen. All right, here we go. Going to go Sal, Randy, Jeff. Last large group of traveling looters forced you and your family out of your retreat. While on their way to their next destination, they drove you and your family hours away and sold you and your family off at a trading post 150 miles from your retreat. A good Samaritan paid the price for you and set you all free. It's time to start over from nothing in a post-apocalyptic world. How would you go about securing the short-term and the long-term survival of you and your family? Sal, You get the first run.
My first thought is, in that kind of situation, you need tribe, you need people. That is the most important thing. And right out of the gate, the person I'd be starting with is the Good Samaritan, because obviously he'd be an individual of means. And the first thing I tell him is, I'm a capable, skilled guy. I can be an asset to you. You've already been an asset to me. I'm in your debt. I want to be part of your tribe. And, you know, that's where I would start. You know, you want to end up in a situation like, did you all see the movie Homestead? It's one of the better post-apocalyptic movies. You know, think that I want to end up with that rich guy in the Rocky Mountains, you know, on his compound there, you know. So I would start with the guy who just bailed me out.
Right on. Actually, Randy, before you go, I looked up a number earlier, and I just looking at my notes, I forgot to share it. The larger tier 1 trauma centers in America have over 1,000 staff and typically over 5,000 patients in the building or buildings at any particular point in time. So pretty big, juicy target for the terrorists. Randy, your thoughts on the conflicted question?
Well, I think Sal nailed it. That's exactly my first thought. One, you're already 150 miles from where you were. This person just bought you out on their, you know, on their kind heart and their faith. So that's definitely, if they weren't going to allow you to be there, you definitely still would where you would want to start to get maybe your first initial things, like even a knife, a stick, something to help defend you and your family. Then, you know, if you're not going to be able to stay with them, you're going to need to know where you're going. And if you're 150 miles away, I don't think you're walking back, right? So that maybe lend on them to point you in the right direction. And, you know, and then you better become the best scavenger of your life at that point and pick up anything and everything that you see that you would be able to use for any reason.
Right on. A great answer, by the way, for both you guys. Jeff?
Yeah, I think, you know, Sal's thing is great, and so is Randy's, you know, but if the guy will take you in, fantastic. If he'll help you out, wonderful. But if not, if he says, nope, sorry, I'm out of here and I can't have you guys coming with me, then you need to secure a place for your family that you can stash them, they can hunker down, you can be safe, that they're not going to get found by the next marauding band, and someplace you can be comfortable leaving them while you go out and forage. Because you're going to have to find food, shelter, water, all of that. You're starting from scratch. And so you can't do any of that if you're worried about your family, or you may not be able to do that if you may have small children that you're, you know, taking along with you. You know, you've got to free yourself up to be able to go out and do what you got to do and be comfortable enough that your spouse can defend herself and the kids. And then you got to start over.
Good advice, Jeff. I don't know that I have a whole lot to add. Those are 3 really awesome answers. I would be, after trying to negotiate with the guy, which is brilliant on y'all's part, I would be working on the food, water, shelter part. You know, you can technically you can go 3 days without water. Typically, though, by the second day, you're mentally not functioning at 100%. So you might not get through that last 24 hours that you can supposedly live without water. So that would be the number 1 priority. And the number 2 priority would be shelter in my mind. And then we'll go look for some food after we know that we've got water and shelter secured. Other than that, there's a comment in one of the chats. Let's see. It's the pen and sword are even mightier, or the pen is mightier than the sword. Have a look at this. So if y'all go to Amazon, look up the Amend G10 self-defense pen, which backs up that person's comment to a T. And basically, the G10 is the tip. It's hard to see against the black here. So it looks like a Sharpie. This is one of them. I keep them on hand. They're super sharp. It's not necessarily the best weapon in the world, but it's better than no weapon in the world. You could do just as much damage with this as a box cutter, like happened on 9/11. So, and as you saw, they're not terribly expensive. You can find them on Amazon. Amend 2 G2 pen. All right, so I think that's it. John's going to be back Sunday evening. Jeff, Randy, and I'll be back Monday. Khalid might be back with us. We're putting together a 3-week, 12-part series on the jihadi threat to the U.S. homeland. It's very detailed. That the curriculum or the order of events, I guess you could say, that Khalid and I are putting out, and it's going to have some really fine-grained intel included in that. Other than that, we're done. Friday night, work week's over for most people, not some of us, but please like, share, comment, subscribe. God bless America.
God bless America.
Good night.
And enjoy the closing video. Thanks, y'all.
Do you ever feel it? That something is wrong with the world, like a splinter in your mind? The Matrix isn't fiction. It's real. A prison built not of walls, but of lies. I saw it young. Hollywood dreams, silicon toys, news anchors with plastic smiles. All tools. Tools to shape perception, to cage thought. Behind the curtain, puppet masters move. They don't wear uniforms. They don't need guns. They run psyops so refined, the Army's ghost unit seems quaint. These are the true threats to America, to Trump's success. You ask who they are. If I told you, would you even believe me? Their network hums not in Congress or courts, but in the cold, sterile halls of globalist think tanks. Foundations with friendly names, but sinister goals. They fund chaos, open borders, climate hysteria, digital leashes. They write the scripts, censor the dissent, push CBDCs to track your every step. But I see through it, and so does he. Did you think the last administration was in charge? Orders signed with an auto pen while the world burned. Now Trump's returned. MAGA isn't a campaign, it's a counterattack. Knight to F3. The center seized, but the board is still crowded. Bureaucrats, media pawns, globalist bishops. They will not surrender the game, because Trump is the one variable they cannot control. Unbought, unbroken, the voice of the people. And if the people ever wake up, if they ever see the psyop for what it is, they'll burn the system to the ground. The real war has only just begun.